So are you saying that unless a founder or one of the founding team has hit an existential crisis, you're not looking to invest in them?
So not every business has to be a venture-backable business. But if you're making that decision consciously, you should at least know what it means. I probably would never ask somebody for money unless I really grinded. But what happened in the last years is there was a disconnect between top line and bottom line. And what happened is the actual traction to where the valuation of these companies went, it just kept getting wider and wider. It was a disaster. So for me, I have an ideal startup founding team. It's my idealistic utopian view. And in Silicon Valley, we see a lot of that. Here, we don't see a lot of that much. So one, and then it's also not surprising, but also not commonly talked about, that the average age of a successful startup founder is 45 or 40 years old plus.
First question.
Yes.
What makes the perfect pitch?
I think it's pretty subjective, but I can give you my answer.
Absolutely. So I'm here today with Sharif El-Badawi, the CEO of Dubai Future District Fund. And thank you for joining us for The Perfect Pitch.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So first question.
Yes.
What makes the perfect pitch?
I think it's pretty subjective, but I can give you my answer.
Absolutely.
I think a perfect pitch is one that comes stemming from a pain point, or a problem that founder has felt directly or identified directly. And that gets built, on top of that, you build on the data that justifies that there is a problem and a proposed solution to that problem. Specifically, that's what I want to hear first. And then I want to hear the next layer of the onion. I don't really care much else. So first, I need to believe that this is really a pain point in that industry or market segment. And I need to believe that your solution is an acceptable solution for this. Then there's layers, of course, after that, but it starts with that.
Beautiful.
I would say instead of going into all the things an investor looks for in a pitch, I would say for me, the common thread throughout all of those subjects is, as they're talking about those subjects like team, product, market, solution, technology, traction, is I'm just listening for the language they're using. Are they going to be like the market leader if I fund this company? Are they going to be the market leader? Because we hear 15 to 20 identical pitches a month or every 6 months or whatever period that concept becomes a trend, you get minimum 15, 20 of those ideas around the world. So how do I know that this is the right team? It's why we hear that team is the most important out of those 5 or 6 categories, especially in the pre-seed seed stage, because you have nothing else to go by but the team. So what I'm looking for is the vocabulary. Are they using the vocabulary of that specific sector or industry or business model that they're going to go after? So if they tell me it's so big, it's going to be huge, we think we're going to use social media to do this and we're going to do that. Okay, great. I mean, all that stuff is fine. But I didn't hear any words related to that specific industry, who the buyers are, the payer, who is the user, are they using the right vocabulary? And then when they talk about the metrics of their business, we know by business model. In SaaS, for example, there are 7 metrics. These are the Bible golden metrics. In fintech, it's transaction-based or take rate-based. I want to hear the metrics of that business model. If it's commerce, as the common one everybody knows. Was your funnel, upper funnel, mid funnel, lower funnel, close rates, basket size, average user, revenue per user, churn rates, net churn rates. I want to know all of those things. So it's very clear from the first pitch whether these people even know what they're talking about or not. And because that is supposed to be the most important thing in the beginning, it matches the things we're looking for. And oftentimes that's probably the number one reason that a company might not get funded. It's not that they didn't identify a problem or, yes, the market needs a solution or the proposed solution is the right one or not. Mm-hmm. Those are secondary to the fact that are we investing in these people? And do we believe these people are going to take it further than any other team we could invest in?
So I'm hearing from you, it's got to be personal. It's got to be the right team. They have to know the industry, the pain points, and tell the story with data.
Yes. And speak the vocabulary. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. What is your biggest pet peeve when it comes to founders coming to you approaching DFDF for funding?
Well, I mean, I think it's subjective again.
All of this is subjective.
Maybe I should not say that again. Look, for me, I'm almost on 30 years in just this subject. And when I was a founder, I didn't even know how to reach a VC, to be honest. So we didn't build our companies that way. We just built the company. This is bootstrapping, essentially, and then whatever money we were making, just put it back in the business. For me now, it really bothers me when a founder tries to approach with passion and energy and almost intrusively, because it happens, without any research on who we are, what we invest in. I mean, it's plain in front of everybody's eyes on our website, or you can go to a lot of other sources and kind of get a better understanding of us. You might be able to see what we've said online on our blogs, because that's also written there, or videos or at talks. Contrast that with a founder who's done their homework. And I've had this experience as well, which is mind-blowingly impressive, where they come to you and says, I've watched every video of what you've said. There were 3 things you've said in the last 10 years that impressed me. And then they rattled them off. And they said, I know you care about impact as well as performance. And I know that you care about this. And I think you're a good fit for us because you guys do pre-seed in ed tech. And I'm based here, right? So they've checked and they know that's why they're talking to us versus, I'm just going to spam every VC there is out there or chase them down at a conference and say, I heard you were an investor. Well, sorry, they happen to be a real estate investor in the US. And so obviously that's not going to be a fit for your fund, your startup. So I think it's a pet peeve because time is a scarce resource. Less and less am I personally able to give my time in a sort of just pick your brain mentorship. Can I meet you for a minute? That kind of thing. I used to put maybe 60, 70% of my time into that kind of free ecosystem giving. And I don't regret doing that. I just don't have that time anymore. So it's frustrating to me because I feel bad that I can't talk to them if they want to talk. But I also expect them to do their homework before they come to the table for their own good. I mean,
pre-qualify themselves.
If you can't do the qualification on your investors, how do I trust that you're qualifying the people you're hiring, that you're qualifying the potential go-to-market strategy and what customers are the right customers? And do you understand that there are certain sales cycles for B2B versus B2C? How are you going to do marketing? All of this falls under that umbrella. And you didn't even do this one right. So what makes us trust that you can do any of them right?
Yeah.
So that's difficult.
Yeah.
And not hard to solve for.
Yeah.
It's really back to basics. And I teach fundraising seminar or whatever presentation. I teach it as sales framework because it is sales. And would you be a salesperson at a company and just start knocking on doors indiscriminately? It would be the most ridiculous thing. So you need to understand, market map your customer segmentation or market map your customer base, segment them, then prioritize them by your go-to-market. Tell me why that's your go-to-market. So if you're selling an air conditioned unit, and this is in my presentation, but if my go-to-market one, not my fundraising one. If you're selling an air conditioned unit, so it's the first one. You're building a new one because it's so cool and efficient. Okay, great. Now I want to ask you to go to market. Are you going to make the air condition for shopping malls and sky rises? Or are you going to make the air condition for homes? Or are you going to make the air condition for something in between? Now there's factors involved in that decision making because the materials needed for the bigger one is going to be more. And you're a baby startup. So That's cash you have to put out before you get any products back, and then you have to go sell those products. You would also consider the sales cycle and who am I selling to. So for a mall or a building, I'm selling to the developer, and I get to sell 50,000 of them, right? And they're big. Okay, that sounds like, wow, stars everywhere, so dollar signs everywhere. So the founder might think that that's an appropriate first go-to-market, a beachhead. But if the home unit is much smaller, I can produce more units, and the shipping costs from wherever I ship them from is cheaper, maybe I should start there. But then I have to think about the sales cycle for that segment. Oh, shoot, well, developers are homogeneous type. I can find them very easily. Homeowners, how are you going to find them? There's hundreds of millions of them. And where? What neighborhood? How are you going to cluster? Is the sales different for each one? But at least the units are cheaper. So that exercise needs to be done first when you're thinking about go-to-market. And if we can tell from the founder, it says, I'm building the AI for conversations. Okay, what's your customer segment? You foolish VC. Everybody is my customer. Oh, wow. Okay, what's your market sizing? The world. Okay, there's nuance to it that maybe that's right, but you're not going to start with that tomorrow, are you? That would be ridiculous. You're just like pouring a cup of water into the ocean and expect everything to work. It's not going to work. Yeah. So these are the kinds of things. They might be subtle ways of answering the question of what do I want to see in a pitch, or would I kind of get bothered by in seeing a pitch? It's the glossing over of all of this stuff and just putting on the pom-poms.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of that. I did that in the 90s myself. I didn't know any better. But then you learn from that, and you learn okay, that didn't work. Let me adjust. What was it? Did it resonate? Is my story wrong? Or is the whole business idea wrong? Or is it just me?
Yeah.
Right? I didn't do my homework. I didn't do the right things. And I think as we talked about once before, I think, it all comes down to all of those 5 or 6 pillars could be there. But if the founder is not believable enough and the investor cannot get conviction that this is going to be the one to take it through the toughest times and stay course and have the grit and resilience, but also understands the vocabulary of what they're doing and they know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. So to be a single founder and to expect to take on all of that is, probability of funding, I think, on something like this is next to nil. But if you bring in your co-founder and you say, look, so for me, I have an ideal startup founding team. It's my idealistic utopian view. And in Silicon Valley, we see a lot of that. Here, we don't see a lot of that much. So one is somebody who can code. I'm talking tech startups.
Yeah.
So somebody who can code. 2, somebody who can get customers. That means digital marketing, growth hacking, mostly from a digital perspective. If you want to build out a huge sales team and go sell brand advertising to large agencies and companies, okay, you need people for that. But in a software-based world, you should be able to be self-serve. If you're a SaaS solution, I should be able to sign up on your website in 5 minutes and start paying and use it. Mm-hmm. Now, not everybody launches with self-serve on their SaaS problem, which is a problem to me. You're going to build a workforce to sell SaaS, but there's a head and a tail, right? So in the head, okay, bigger dollars, bigger customer name, you probably need, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months sales cycle to get into B2B SaaS because you're selling to the CTO or you're selling to the director of IT, but you need buy-in from the marketing team, right? So that is complicated and it has gotten shorter over time. And there's a B2B2C model, which is you get the end users to use it and then eventually the company signs up for an account. Slack is the famous example for that. But then again, there's a long tail. So when I was at AdMob, for example, we had a brand, it's an advertising network. We had a brand team. It was all people, right? Basically relationship driven, rate card driven. And then we had the long tail, which was in the beginning was not so promising looking, right? Because these guys are selling $50,000 campaigns. It takes a while, but the long tail we knew it's a performance advertising sort of mechanism is mostly going to go long tail. So we only had 2 customer support people managing the inbound self-serve. But when those people see a spike in spend from a particular individual, influencer, customer, whatever publisher, then it sends it to what ended up becoming the team I was part of. It was just 2 of us actually in the beginning, and it became 12 people. So it became the size of the brand team over a year or two, year and a half. And how do we do that? When there was a spike there, the customer support person would send it to one of us. We would call them. Oh, I see you're spending on the platform. Can we help you optimize? Can we help you with this? Eventually, because we're now managing that account, it starts to grow. So by a year and a half, 2 years into it, performance revenue started to equal brand revenue. And then, of course, later after getting acquired by Google, performance revenue just took off because the word got out, and it's self-service, sort of easy to build your own campaigns and things like that. So today when I see young startups not thinking about sort of the digital growth path or understanding growth frameworks in general, because that's the whole promise of software in the first place. It's why venture backing works for startups, is because you need to grow faster than normal. Mm-hmm. So you need outside capital to help you do that. But the engine has to be scalable. So you hear this feedback all the time. Oh, scalability. It sounds lame when it's not qualified. When you say, like, why do I need to see scalability in my startup? Because I need to build a product that sells over and over again, right? In a very sort of scalable way.
Yeah.
So I think for a lot of those reasons, they're tied together. So at what point does it make sense to take outside capital? You need to have figured out, we won't say product market fit necessarily, but you need to have traction. Traction is a proxy indicator that a team was able to come together and agree on things, build something together, so product, and find customers, so market, so team, product, market. So we just found 3 of the main pillars in a proxy called traction, because otherwise you wouldn't have traction.
Don't come to DFDF if you don't have traction yet.
I mean, we enjoy speaking to founders right before that point. Yeah. And we have invested at the pre-seed level. So pre-seed level, let's say, is you have a product or you have MVP. You might have traction, very early traction. I'd like to see, typically I like to see 3 months of traction because I can draw a line and see the trend. So we look at month over month growth. Now, speaking about vocabulary, when a startup pitches you, says, we're doing great. Why did you say that? It means nothing to me. If you tell me we grew 20% month over 3 months, that tells me like 100 things. So if they're doing a disservice by not using the right vocabulary, and if they're not on purpose, it's a different story then. They're now hiding information.
Right.
And you can tell, we just saw a deck yesterday, we looked at it as a team. It had this super CMGR, so compounded monthly annual growth revenue revenue growth rate. Yes. From like, I don't know, 6 months ago to today. And it was going almost straight up. But there was a tail behind that where they started to measure. So they only measured this, but there's like a tail over here. I said, why are they using that number? We don't use that number in startups. We don't use compounded monthly. That's a finance term. So what I want to know is the month over month growth. But if you see the bar chart underneath it, there was this little column, and then it went down. And then this month, the current month, was way up here. So they looked at that as compounded monthly. Guys, there's zero consistency. I want 3 dots, and that's not 3 dots. Mm-hmm. So that was a fluke. Okay, what happened? Well, great. Maybe you're onto something now, and before it was shaky. Okay, show me next month too. Because it could be seasonality, oftentimes it is, but it also could be something else, and they have not identified the something, so they can't articulate to me why that spike happened. So then they haven't really crafted their solution.
Got it. Beautiful. I feel like there's already 20 pieces of advice in this. What is your biggest piece of advice for founders to navigate the current climate?
So my advice might sound like it's advice for any time, okay. and it's because it is. But in particular in these climates, this becomes even more important. And maybe people will listen now that we've had almost 3 black swans in a row, and we're in a global downturn in venture capital. So maybe people will start to heed the advice. But it was the same advice. And in venture in particular, when the market's up, or in a bullish situation like we saw in the last few years, venture should take a step back and go back to these 2 principles, and I'll tell you. But when a market is down, like we're currently down, that's when venture steps forward. But that didn't happen. So 2015-ish until, this downturn, we were in the most bullish market in venture capital. We had nouveau investors because some of the older generations have sort of passed the baton. We had 2,000 or 3,000 new VC firms pop out of nowhere without sort of the indoctrination it takes. So were you a founder? Were you working in tech? And then you became a VC. So what we call operator to VC model. And we had a massive influx of founders. I've called nouveau founders in the same vein, because they just saw something happening over there and they said, whoa, me too. I'm going to do the same thing, without sort of the indoctrination part. Have you worked at startups before? Have you seen how hard it is? Have you learned the operational side? These kinds of things.
If you're going to put in 4 or 5 years to start a company and you're asking other people to put their money in it, try to find something that has a lot of meaning to it. Like not just, I want to be famous or rich, because then that's not enough of a drive to have the grit to continue the process. And we'll feel that right away. Do your research, and do your research means don't be tone deaf about which VCs you approach. So if you know that a certain VC, or if you did your research, you would know what VCs invest in what, at what stages, and what they expect. Talk to friends who've taken money from them or got rejected from them, and then do it in the mirror. Doing research in the mirror is face the truth about where you stand. What is your status compared to what other people, what gets investment? Are you really where you think you are or not? And I think a lot of people don't give themselves that truth.
That critical assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I certainly am maybe too much on the fault of that side all my life. So I was always too afraid, didn't think I was good enough, over prepare for everything. And, I think it's clear when founders have done the homework on their own. Also in my day, in the 90s, we didn't pitch VCs in the beginning. We would build a company, and as it has traction, then you would go ask for money to grow. And that changed, 5-10 years ago, where first thing they do, okay, back of the napkin kind of idea, let me go get money. So it's really clear that they haven't gone through the motions or the cycles, the pains even. Like you need to kind of struggle. You need to jump off a cliff without a bottom. And then that's when the magic happens, right? And it's on the other side of the table, it's clear that magic has happened.
So are you saying that unless a founder or one of the founding team has hit an existential crisis, you're not looking to invest in them?
Or identified. I mean, it depends if we're talking about the pain point they're trying to solve, or if they themselves have gone through the ringer trying to do something. But kind of both need to happen. And it sounds a little sadistic, I guess, to want somebody to have gone through the pain. But I did it myself. I think you can become better from it. And other than that, how do you know they're going to be able to withstand everything that's going to come their way in the future? And they're not just going to be responsible for themselves or their team after they take money. They're responsible for shareholders as well. So there is an inflection point of building a company and then building a venture-backed company.
Right.
And I don't think founders spend enough time thinking about the difference. My first 5 or 6 startups from the 90s to about 2009, I didn't raise money from anyone. And we made a lot of money. So not every business has to be a venture-backable business. But if you're making that decision consciously, you should at least know what it means. And I probably would never ask somebody for money unless I've really grinded. And even then, I still feel guilty asking people for money. So, but everybody's made differently. And I think the trend in the last 10 or 15 years with young entrepreneurs is the first thing they do is this easy way out, instant gratification. Yeah. And we were warning about that before. Now we've seen it actually, what happens when you do that. Overfunding, no discipline. You didn't train the muscle of cash efficiency, capital efficiency. You didn't get squeezed enough to force innovation to come out, right? And so then you're missing actually all the core components of why the magic happens in a successful startup. It's because of that squeezing, right? It's like making a diamond. Yeah. If you're not under pressure, how are you ever going to survive, I think, building a company long term?
I think there's also this other angle that a lot of startups just think a successful startup is a venture-backed one, but actually there comes immense responsibility and pressure with VC funding.
You're right.
And so, yeah, perhaps there needs to be that more thought of like, what does it mean when you're raising funds, and how does your business actually change as soon as you get that first check?
Yeah, your responsibility and governance level goes up, right? Once you have a board, once you have other people's money, you're responsible for your shareholders. And you're also responsible for the law that you're domiciled in. And so there's a lot of governance, internal controls, compliance that you have to abide by. And so it's a leap into that next category. And some people are not conscious they're making that leap. Most people, I would say, are not conscious that they're making that. If you were to ask me what were the two drivers that caused the last 5 or 6 years of fluff, I'd say one of them was the lack of governance in the entire industry, from VCs to founders to everyone in between. It was like there was a complete ignoring of that stuff, mattering at all. Second part was this efficiency, both efficiency in innovation and efficiency in capital. I think both of those went out the window. Raise more money, keep pushing your valuation up. Who cares if the top line and the bottom line don't align? Who cares if your valuation and your traction don't align? But those things became so far apart that even after layoffs, cost cutting, everything like that, and trying to bring it down and going to VCs and saying, I'll accept a down round, even 70% off, you're still far off because you never built the muscle. So, they say necessity is a driver of innovation. You never had the necessity period. And when can you get it? Even any of us doing anything in life, if we didn't do the first part, where it's like that grind, but we jump to this sort of cushy, easy part in life, you can never go back to grind. It only gets softer, right? Life just gets softer for you. It's really hard to build the other way around. So I think that what we try to do, at least in down markets, is catch the early companies who are not on the VCIV yet, and make sure that we go back to discipline as an investor, which is you need to see those initial indicators that this is going to be the company that can get you 10 to 20x return. It's not that we expect every company to get us that, but in the power law situation of venture, if you invested in 10 companies and 6 out of the 10 died, and 2 out of the 10 give you 1 to 2x, which is negative in an IRR scenario, 1 to 2 of them need to return the entire fund. And you're expecting to return 2 to 3x. That's what everybody promises. That bar is there because those investors have other asset classes they could be returning money from, and it's a 10-year lockup blind pool. So in order to get people over the hurdle of even investing in a venture fund, they need 2 to 3x or equivalent to 20-25% net IRR. That's a really high bar for venture to pass, but it works over time. If you look at vintages over 10, 20, 30 years, it works. But because 8 out of 10 don't get you the returns you need, the 1 or 2 has to get 10 to 20x to return 2 to 3x. So that's a really hard odds, right? So that's from the venture side, the VC side of things. But from the founder side of things, like the number of obstacles that a founder has to face if she's going to go through regulation, if she's going to go through market making, if she's going to go through hiring and building a product, there's a number of disciplines you have to know. So it's actually odd that 20 to 25-year-olds are able to build successful companies, but it's also maybe because they're not ingrained in any thinking or process or bureaucracy. Yeah. And then it's also not surprising, but also not commonly talked about, that the average age of a successful startup founder is 45 or 40 years old plus. So it's like kind of both sides of the spectrum are valid. So I think for me, it's the two things are discipline in investing, and for founders, it's in running your company. So you need to bootstrap in order to feel it and to learn how to be efficient. And second is the discipline in cash flow management and innovation, making sure that you're actually solving a real problem before. So don't get ahead of yourself and say, okay, I think this is a good solution, let me try selling it. Really talk to customers as you're building it. I mean, this was something we learned in the early 2000s, that
the perfect software product doesn't come from the engineering team. It comes from a blend of the commercial need and the technology solution. And together, so it was post-internet boom and bust that we started to think that way. Before that, we were like perfectionist thinking, obviously, in the real world. So the blend of that was the 2000 to 2015 period. I think you saw a lot of demand coming from the commercial side, engineering, thinking, okay, how can we build the right solution for it? It's why we ask about the problem that you're solving for and what solution you're proposing to it. We want to make sure that you're close enough to the proposed customer. And you'll see that come out in the conversation in the first 20 minutes, whether there's any thought around that. So discipline around, let me focus on founders because that's the question. Discipline in the beginning to build something meaningful. Doing the research on the space you're doing it in, your competitive landscape, your go-to-market, how are you going to talk to these customers? What have been problems in the past for people who have tried to propose things like that? Be self-aware and aware of your environment. And it's surprising how many people are not. And then discipline around your economics. So one thing that kind of went out the window maybe 10 years ago is the adaptation of venture capital will solve everything, so I don't need to be profitable. Okay, to a degree, yes, we never as VCs asked you to be profitable, but that's not because it's not the end goal. There are stages to it. We know that if you were to grow at the speed or the rate that needed for this solution to work, you're going to need outside capital. By definition, you're going to go negative in your cash flow because we're spending more than you make. Okay, that's acceptable. There's a difference between cash flow and profitability. So you can be cash flow negative, cash flow positive, and that can be episodic or consistent. And then you can reach profitability, which is a totally different story. What we want founders to be is have a line of sight to cash flow positivity so you can survive in case something happens. And in order to do that, you have to have control over your unit economics. Profitability is something we say, save it for later. Nobody's expecting you to be, how could you be profitable if you just took $5 million from the outside? You're not profitable until you pass that value in some way, which is usually event driven that triggers, how do we know that you've passed that value? So cash flow positivity, absolutely we need it. Now that we're in a downturn again, discipline is coming back. Unit economics matter, or what we call bottom line. So bottom line matters just as much as top line. And what went out of control is everybody was focusing on top line, investors and founders. It's nobody's specific fault. It's just got exciting at the top line because top line helped me raise money, and I'll just keep growing until, the Ponzi scheme runs out. But of course that's not sustainable. But if you have grinded and bootstrapped until you figured out unit economics on a solution, you're like, you know what, this works. I sell it for $2, I make $1. Okay, then your unit is healthy. You can go crazy on the spending around that. So you can spend more than you make, as we said, but your unit is healthy. Then you will eventually be able to catch up. But what happened in the last years is there was a disconnect between top line and bottom line. And what happened is the actual traction to where the valuation of these companies went, it just kept getting wider and wider. It was a disaster. It was a disaster in the making. And if you told any founder, oh, you're the bad guy, you're the VC against me. Like, yeah, but I'm doing this for you. The first deal I ever did, I don't tell people this that much, but the first deal I ever did in MENA, I negotiated with the founder to double their valuation as a condition of me coming in. Because the other investor was coming to the table. Together, I think me and the other investor would have given $200,000 for 30% of the company. And the company just started. So I said, no, I'm not doing that. I said, I know it's good for me on paper, but it's going to be bad for you and it's going to be bad for me in the long run. So let's all be greedy, but let's be long-term greedy. Short-term greedy gets us nowhere, which is win-lose negotiations, squeeze people now, hoping, you're going to win later. That's never worked. So why is it ever going to work now? But if we're a long game, and especially here at DFDF, we're long-term investors, we're patient capital. I want to see you become the best solution for that problem for the long term, to be an enduring company. So you can't play games in the beginning, right?
So if you overvalue your company, pre-seed, first thing you do is wake up and you're raising $1 million, which as we said, is not the right way to do it. But if you did, and you say, well, I'm only willing to give up 10% of my company. Okay, good for you. That's smart. But that puts you at a 10 million valuation from day one. Well, great. You tinker for 6 to 9 months, and then it becomes, I need more money. You go to the market, well, what do you have to show that you need more money? And now you're raising at a higher valuation than 10 million. And then the whole thing just keeps going like that and never catches up. I know that was longer than 30 seconds.
The runaway.
You're really patient.
No, but that's great. Sharif, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
Hey there. Thanks for joining this conversation. If you enjoyed that episode and you want to start researching potential investors for your startup's fundraising strategy, go to lucidityinsights.com and sign up now to the startup registration package by clicking the plans button on the top right corner. We look forward to having you join our future conversations and checking out our additional content. Until next time, stay hungry and stay humble.